with that, let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions for week 7. All right, Boone, give us question number 1 for week 7.
Love that sound. I just love hearing that sound every single week. We should play that way more often than just once a week on Thursdays. Anyway, I think the first thing, there's so many injuries that we got to talk about, but let's go the positive route first. So, what should fantasy managers expect from especially all the receivers who look like they're coming back from injuries and one from suspension, of course, this week? But we're getting back a bunch of names this week, right? Rashee Rice finally come back. We've been waiting on that one for so long. Fantasy managers super excited about what he could potentially do. CeeDee Lamb, we got some good news here. It seemed like he was trending that way. Jerry Jones was making his usual comments and kind of tipping his hand about who was going to play this week. Really seems now like CeeDee Lamb is going to play. He had a quote that came out right before we started recording about how he thought he could have played last week, but they were kind of cautious and held him out just in case. So he'll be back. Mike Evans, it looks like he's going to finally return, and couldn't be a better time for that Bucs offense because they have so many injuries. Everyone else there is hurt, and Mike Evans is going to step back in, and got some quotes from Baker Mayfield that really make it seem like that is going to happen this week. We're not 100% sure yet, but that one's trending that way. Quentin Johnston, he could come back this week. He's back to a limited practice. I know you don't want to hear that. You don't want to see anybody hurt, but you would probably love him to take his time coming back so that solidify Ladd McConkey as a top 20 receiver, top 15 receiver, something like that.
Let me just get on the record here. I don't think I need Quentin Johnston to miss games to avoid the pen, eating the pen. Right. Okay. I want to, if I'm going to avoid the pen, God, yeah, we're safe, baby. I want to avoid it honorably, okay? I've got it right here. Always do. I want to avoid it honorably. Let's get QJ out there. Let's get him in the mix. I'm not afraid.
Obviously, that's what fantasy managers want. Fantasy managers want to see Terry McLaurin back out there, too. He started the week with a limited practice. I thought he was going to have a chance. Today, drops back down to DNP. So we're not sure if he's going to play this week. I would say, if anything, now he's trending to not play in this one. Maybe there was a setback. Totally speculating on that, but we're to keep an eye on what he's doing out there. And then, like, way down the list, Jalen Coker is probably going to play this week. We talked about him on Monday, a favorite of ours, a guy that we think could come back and put up some good stats. Not quite on the same level of all the other names I mentioned, but needless, a guy who can definitely, he can definitely produce for fantasy and can definitely get into lineups. Hopefully, maybe you don't want to put him in right away in his first game back, but I think he will be a guy who's in fantasy lineups down the stretch here.
Do you have any hesitation outside of Coker? Fine, I'll grant you that. I'll be serious for a minute. Outside of Jalen Coker, do you have any hesitation about projecting any of these guys for like a full bore workload in their first game back?
I mean, Rashee Rice, it's funny how Andy Reid's been like kind of coy about saying how much he's going to play, but this is a weird one where, yes, he is kind of coming back from an injury because he had the knee injury last year, caused him to miss most of the season. But then he gets an extra 6 weeks. And even before that, we saw him on the practice field. By all accounts, he looked great. They were peppering him with targets. So to get 6 more weeks after that doesn't really make me that worried. I think the concern with him is the thing a lot of people have brought up, that last year when he was going off, Xavier Worthy wasn't really a thing yet. So now with Worthy out there, how is this all going to come together? That's not a concern for me because I think everything we've heard from people around the Chiefs organization is that this is their number one receiver. This is the guy they want to build around. I mentioned before on the show, whether you go back to his rookie season, those final 10 games, he was a top 15 fantasy wideout. Last year, before he gets hurt, very small sample size in the first 3 games, but again, putting up those wide receiver 1 numbers. So I think he's going to hit the ground running, and I think it might almost end up being like a good thing that he missed these 6 weeks and kind of got his health all the way back, hopefully. And now he can get out there and produce. CeeDee Lamb, I mean, a high ankle sprain definitely is concerning for a skill position player because you don't know if that's something that's going to sap some effectiveness when he comes back. But based on those quotes from him and the way he's talking, the fact that he thought he could have potentially played last week, that gives me a little bit of confidence. And I'm not worried at all about like the George Pickens aspect. Like CeeDee Lamb is right up there, arguably the top receiver in the world. He's in that conversation, at least with those guys. This is somebody that even before he got hurt, right? 110 yards, 112 yards in those 2 games, like just phenomenal. He was the number 1 fantasy receiver overall a couple of years ago. So he's done it before. I think he steps right back in and puts up big numbers. And then the question more will be what happens to George Pickens? What happens to Jake Ferguson? Are they going to be able to still come along for the ride? Obviously, Pickens is not going to be a top 5 fantasy wideout like he was when Lamb was out. But I think the amount that this offense has to throw, I mean, they're leading the league in completions right now. The defense is terrible. I think everybody's going to be okay. You know, it might take a little bit off Pickens, of course, drop him down into the wide receiver 2 range, but it's like high-end wide receiver 2 range and arguably could be a low-end wide receiver 1. We've seen other teams give us 2 top 12 fantasy receivers before. And if there was ever an environment where that could happen and the talent and everything involved, it would be those 2 guys. So I've moved Jake Ferguson down just a little bit, but no, not worried about Lamb at all. Mike Evans, like when I was going back and looking at like all the injuries that he's had, the hamstring thing, it's been like nonstop. Like he's had like, it's been like 7 straight years or something where he's had some sort of hamstring injury. It's really unfortunate. You hope that this isn't something that as he's getting older pops up again, but based on the way that Baker Mayfield was out there talking about it, really seems like they're excited to have him back. That, you know, Baker Mayfield saying that he's a guy that defenses have to account for. And earlier in the season, the numbers weren't great for Evans. Like it was like around 50 yards in those games. I think he scored a touchdown in week 3 before he got hurt. But that was with Emeka Egbuka just totally breaking out at that time. And now we're not going to have Emeka Egbuka, it looks like. Chris Godwin's not going to play in this game. Bucky Irving not going to play in this game. So they're going to really need Mike Evans to step up out there. So no, not really worried about them. Quentin Johnson would be the one where if he's not 100%, is he the kind of player that can actually go out there and still put up big numbers, or will he take maybe a bit of a backseat to Ladd McConkey or to Keenan Allen? So I guess some reservations there. I'm not putting him back up into the top 15, even the top 20. I want to see him at practice a little more, see some confirmation that he is close to 100% or 100%. So I guess he would be the one that maybe, but it's also just based on the fact that those other guys I mentioned are like supreme talents. I think they're on a different level than QJ is.
I think so too. And yeah, I mean, with the Mike Evans thing, that's interesting because he had 51 yards, 56 yards, 33 yards with a touchdown in week 3. Also dropped 3 passes in that game, according to True Media. So 37.5% of his targets were dropped in that game, which happens sometimes with a guy like Mike Evans. You know, you're going to get some of those dropsy games. But yeah, those are 2 tough matchups. There are a few tough matchups in here. Obviously against Houston, that's a difficult spot. The Jets, typically it's been the number 2 receiver, not the number 1 receiver that's gone off against them, with Sauce Gardner kind of trailing around the field with those number 1 wideouts. So this is definitely a much better spot for him coming back Monday night against a banged up Lions defense. I think we'll talk about that matchup on the Lions side of it later, but yeah, this could be definitely a fast track, very exciting fantasy football matchup. So I'm definitely, if I've got Rice, Lamb, Evans, I'm probably starting all those guys. Just last point quickly on Rashee Rice, because I know he's a player we've talked about a lot. I love that comment that we had on the screen earlier from Patrick Mahomes about it's going to force defenses to either play coverage on them, you know, play deep, like don't, because they've got a ton of speed, right? Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Worthy, not as much Marquise Brown anymore. I'm kind of done talking about Marquise Brown as a speed threat, more like intermediate area at best. But they've obviously got speed downfield, and they've hit those plays a little bit more consistently this year than last year. They just haven't had that like innings eater, the volume guy underneath. So I think it will be fascinating to see if Rashee Rice is immediately back to like that 10 targets type of role, because they have run a lot of RPOs and he's the type of guy that should be on the other end of those targets, the screens as well. He should be the guy there, but I know they do want to access that deep area as well. So just generally fascinated to see what he looks like. I have Rice in my guillotine league. Shout out to me. I survived long enough to now finally plug him into the lineup. I'm playing him with no reservations, but I am at least just willing to be pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised into what the role looks like in the first game back.
Yeah, hopefully where you drafted him, he doesn't have to step in, depending on injuries. He doesn't have to step in and be your number one receiver in your lineup, right? Because you were getting that discount. If you've survived this far, you're able to slot him in as your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, maybe if you're lucky, even your flex. I have one team where I was very excited to bring him back, and then Emeka Egbuka gets hurt last week, so he's just swapping into that spot in the lineup, but that's okay. We'll take it, right? Once Egbuka gets healthy, then my lineup will get that boost. So I'm excited for it. And I think it's a great spot for him to come back to, right? Going against the Raiders, they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to receivers this year. So I think he can come back. They're going to want to get him going. And I think that's what they've really hoped for this offense. And the injury last year and the suspension this year has just delayed the fact that they want him to be that true number one receiver. You go back even to practice, like I was saying, in the summer, and he was getting peppered with targets. The beat writers were commenting that, man, he is catching a lot of passes out here. I think we're just going to see that translate to the regular season now that he's going to be active. So it's super exciting for fantasy, and it's exciting for the Chiefs. Not that they need another weapon with the way Patrick Mahomes is playing and, the path that they've gotten on in the last few weeks here. Not that they need yet another boost, but he's going to give it to them.
All right, let's get into your second question, which is a good jumping off point from the Mike Evans discussion.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we got to go the other way with it and that this list is even longer than that first list. But what's the fantasy impact going to be from all these new injuries and especially all these new wide receiver injuries that we had from last week, right? So, of course, the Bucs is the first one, like you mentioned. Emeka Egbuka just having an unbelievable year, and now he's hurt. And it looks like he's going to miss a little bit of time. On top of that, Chris Godwin, we really don't know what's happening with him, right? They're calling it fibula.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's related to that other injury. I mean, they're already ruling him out. Like early in the week, they ruled him out for the Monday night game. So that's not a great sign. It looks like he's probably going to miss a bunch of time. And we talked about that before the season as a possibility, right? At his age, coming back from that serious injury where he had to have multiple surgeries on it. And I said one of the reasons I was very excited about Egbuka was because we weren't sure what Chris Godwin was going to give us this year, when he was going to return. And even once he got back, what kind of player was he going to be? And would he ever get back to the same level based on the seriousness of that injury and based on his age? And it really seems like maybe he won't now. And that's terrible because Chris Godwin has been a fantastic fantasy player for a long time. Seems like a great dude. So hopefully we're rooting for him. We want to see him back out there this year doing something, contributing to this team, especially because this team looks like it can make a run. And then you just go down the list here. The Rams, like losing Puka Nacua, a guy who was emerging as arguably the top fantasy receiver out there, one of the best receivers in the league for sure. He's going to miss at least a week with this ankle injury. Then they have the bye that he can kind of heal up then. And I think they're going to reassess after that. I don't think it's a guarantee that he's going to be back after that. So he's not out there practicing like the Schefter tweet there says. And we'll see what he's going to look like. I don't think he's going to play this week. We'll see what the things look like for him coming off the bye. The Jets, they're not going to have Garrett Wilson for at least a couple weeks here with the knee injury. And to make matters even worse, their second receiver, they don't have a very deep receiver core. Their second receiver, Josh Reynolds, was DNP yesterday, limited today. So he might not even be 100%. And then that puts us down to like the rookie Arian Smith, that maybe Alan Lazard gets out there. I mean, really seems like all signs would point to the rookie tight end, Mason Taylor, getting a lot of volume in this game. He's somebody that we brought up a few times in recent weeks, but man, really, really tough for an offense that was struggling through the air to now not have Garrett Wilson, really the only guy that was having success in the passing game there. DJ Moore, maybe a little bit of positive news on him. He's day-to-day after getting hospitalized in that game on Monday. I mean, he played 94% of the snaps, but then after the game, took him to the hospital. They said it was mostly precautionary. They called it hip and groin, I believe. They didn't really give a ton of details on what it was. Missed practice yesterday. Back out there today, though, in some fashion. We'll keep an eye on that one. He might be able to play. If not, that could be the thing that maybe unlocks a little more playing time for Luther Burden, who I know you have said you think can do a lot of DJ Moore style things out there. And we've seen him start to make some plays and come on. So could be some more opportunity if DJ Moore can't play this week. But that's one we're probably going to have to track all the way through until the weekend. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's in concussion protocol, but he's out there practicing in a non-contact jersey. So that at least gives him a chance to clear this week. Hopefully he does. Would obviously like to see him out on the field. Sadly, talking about concussion protocol. Josh Downs, he popped up in concussion protocol this week, and now he's not practicing. So it's looking pretty rough for him. I don't think he's going to be able to go. And then Ashton Dulin on the Colts as well. He's probably not going to be able to play in this game. He's not practicing either. So I know they got Alec Pierce back last week. Of course, they have Tyler Warren at tight end. They have Michael Pittman. Does A.D. Mitchell get back in the mix? They were like punishing him based on that game he had a few weeks ago where he cost them the win. But if these guys are going to be out, it almost looks like they have to put him out there unless they want to get like Anthony Gould more involved. Like, I doubt they go that road. So get A.D. Mitchell back out there, give him another chance. We know that he can make some plays, and hopefully he cleans up some of those mistakes. And then Calvin Ridley. I mean, this list, Harmon, just goes on and on and on.
It goes on.
Calvin Ridley, DNP. He has the hamstring injury from last week. It happened early in the game, missed most of that contest. It's not looking great for his week 7 outlook, but another one that we'll have to pay attention to and see if he can get back on the field here.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to go. It was a long list.
You love
bro.
your receivers so much, so we're going over a bunch of them here. Like, does anyone stand out to you there? Like, it must pain you to see all of these kind of big name receivers, guys that would be in fantasy lineups, obviously getting hurt. You know, is there anybody on that list that you want to get into the weeds on here, either because you think they're going to be able to play, or with them out, it maybe opens up some opportunity for somebody else?
Yeah, you're right. Seeing Josh Downs, Garrett Wilson, Puka, Agbuk on here, it's like that's just disgusting. It's heartbreaking, truly, if we want to think about it. But yeah, I think the guy I'm really interested in, if Marvin Harrison can get back in this game, I'm of course really interested in him potentially playing with Jacoby Brissett. Like basically everything I said last week, just roll it back to last week. I'm excited to see him potentially in that offense. We saw Jacoby Brissett have a productive passing game, which I think says more about the Colts secondary than it does Jacoby Brissett. But they also got under center a lot more. I think activated more of the true drop back, kind of over the middle intermediate stuff in the passing game that's there in Drew Petzing's offense. Just Kyler's not going to get to. So that he's obviously a guy I'm really tracking, and I would like to play in fantasy if he is indeed available. From an injury replacement standpoint, I want to call to this YouTube poll we just throw into the chat because it's funny. We have, 2 tight ends listed here in terms of who's going to step up most with injuries to all these wide receivers. And I kind of actually agree. The guy who won the poll here, Mason Taylor at 35%. Yeah, bro, I'll tell you what, if it's Tyler Johnson and Arian Smith and Alan Lazard, yeah, Mason Taylor, who probably got dropped a bunch in leagues last week after he, caught one pass against the Denver Broncos, he actually is in a pretty good spot here, Boone, because the Panthers' run defense has been good this year. They've quietly really turned that unit around. Derek Brown is so awesome, and his return has been felt immediately after he missed most of last season. They're still struggling to defend on the back end, mostly like explosive perimeter passes on the other side of J.C. Horn, but I think you can still get them over the middle of the field with tight ends as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I know that game last week was a big time down game for Mason Taylor, and I say that as somebody who talked him up as a pickup the week before, but there was nobody coming through on the Jets in that game, right? They got completely shut down in that one, and yet somehow lingered in the game for as long as they did. It was a really, really strange contest in another country. We're willing to give him a pass there because the week before he saw 12 targets. Like, we saw him commanding a ton of volume just 2 weeks ago. So of course they could potentially do that again here. And the Panthers are a plus matchup for tight ends, for fantasy tight ends. So yeah, I think Taylor is a great call. I'm going to have him inside my top 12 this week for tight ends. I think he's a guy that you definitely want to get into your lineup unless you are blessed and you have one of the top tight ends. And there's a handful up at the top that are matchup proof guys that you're playing every week. And other than that, if you are living in the low end tight end 1 ranks, you can pretty much shuffle around and play any number of guys that are available on the waiver wire or that are coming on, or some of the veterans that are still lingering, like a Zach Ertz. It's not a great place to live for fantasy. And yet somebody like Taylor is the kind of guy that could come on here and could potentially emerge as that like true every week starter for you. And I think it might start this week with Garrett Wilson out of the lineup.
Oh man, I had one fantasy team that I was feeling so good about. And I picked up Mason Taylor, even though I had Travis Kelce. I was like, oh, we'll just see what happens. Kelce's role could really diminish after Rashee Rice gets back. And then Garrett Wilson goes down with injury. Calvin Ridley was like the top reserve player. He's obviously probably going to miss this game. I got another dude on bye, and now it's like I might have to flex Mason Taylor and play Travis Kelce. So I'm maybe wish casting some of that into existence. Luther Burden is a guy that people are definitely
flexing a tight end, not a great fantasy strategy normally, unless you're in a tight end premium league. That normally leads to losses. Yeah.
Not a lot of bench spots and not a lot of dudes available on the waiver wire that are very exciting, but we'll see if I can talk myself into one of these guys here, which I'll bring up in just a little bit. Luther Burden, though, is a guy that people are definitely wish casting into a bigger role. And if DJ Moore does miss this game, which we obviously don't know, I think this could be a really nice spot for Luther Burden, who is the type of yak player that you probably want to get activated against a Brandon Staley style defense where they're trying to put that umbrella coverage on you on the back end. He's been a guy that he's had some screen work. He's had some work underneath after the catch. Definitely somebody that I'm interested in from a fantasy standpoint. Like, I don't know what his role would be, but he is the direct backup to me to DJ Moore. Like, Olamide Zaccheaus is not going to go into his role. He's not going to become the other guy in two receiver sets, the flanker or the X when Rome moves around. It would be Luther Burden. So he is somebody that is still available in a lot of leagues that I would pick up and stick at the end of my bench just to see what happens anyways. But I actually think you could get a start out of him if there's no DJ Moore in this game.
Yeah, I brought up my deep stashes column that I put out every Thursday, and I look at players who are available in 85% of leagues or more. So I use that 15% rostered cutoff and look at guys below that. So that is for like the true sickos, the deep leagues out there. And I've hit on a bunch of guys. The idea is basically, who are the players going to be that everyone's picking up on Tuesday and on Wednesday the week after? You try to get ahead of the waiver wire on that. And Burden was somebody that I wrote up this week for sure, because even though Moore played the vast majority of the snaps in that game, we've seen them making an effort over their last few games to try to get him some plays, even if it is trick plays, that sort of thing. They have still tried to make an effort to get him involved a little more. And we saw in that game where Moore played the majority of the snaps, and yet still we saw Burden set career highs, right? In targets, in catches, finished with 4 grabs for 51 yards in that game. And that's with DJ Moore playing most of the snaps. So if Moore were to miss time, I'm totally with you where obviously Rome Odunze is the lead guy. He is the top guy in that receiving core. They haven't really gotten the tight ends doing that much out there. And this could maybe be a spot where Colson Loveland could get a little more involved. And yet coming out of the bye last week, we saw Burden get some work. We saw Kyle Monunga in the backfield get some work. And Colson Loveland really didn't produce in that game. And you wonder if it's going to take him a little more time. I certainly wouldn't be looking to him as somebody that you want to put in your lineup. He would just be a guy that we're stashing for right now. But Burden is somebody that you could play. And like you said, he's that kind of dynamic playmaker, a guy who you can get the ball in his hands and let him make some plays. We saw him in the preseason make some big plays as well. And that made me excited about what he could potentially do as the year goes along, and whether that was going to require a DJ Moore injury, a DJ Moore trade potentially, maybe, or we just seen a lot of rookies over the years come on as the season progresses, and maybe that could happen here as well. But it looks like there will be a chance for either DJ Moore to not play or DJ Moore to be potentially a little limited in this game, right? If he's not out there practicing in full all week, maybe that's a way that they just get more plays and more reps for Burden throughout the week and get him more involved. So yeah, he would be, if Moore's out, he's in that conversation as it's a risky play for sure, but as a wide receiver 3 flex option this week.
Real quick, what do you think of Jordan Whittington as like a deep stash type guy? It might be a short-term thing, but he is definitely somebody that I think is the direct replacement to Puka Nacua. Not saying he's going to do Puka Nacua's stat production, obviously, but stylistically, there's some overlap between how those guys theoretically should win.
Yeah, we talked about him on Monday's show, I believe, right? If not, I wrote about him in the column for sure. I had his name in there. The opportunity he got last year, he stepped up in his chances, right? He had 8 targets in one game in week 4, caught 6 of them for 62 yards. Week 5, 7 for 89 on 10 targets. Like, he's shown he can produce in the pros. And that another guy where they have him waiting in the wings, and it's almost like that one injury away running back where you're just waiting for that opportunity. Well, if Luther Burden in Chicago can step in and do some DJ Moore things, then yes, absolutely, Whittington can step in and do some Puka Nacua things. And if he gives you 60, 70% of what Nakua can give you, that's the guy that you're going to play in fantasy. Like, that's for sure, right? And yeah, we're never going to expect that he's going to replicate Puka in that offense, but he brings that physicality. He's a very versatile receiver. And yeah, I think they're going to need him to step up in this game because Devontae Adams is up there. He will be the number one. He will step in. Tutu Atwell missed last week. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. We'll see. I believe he was limited in practice so far this week, so we'll see if he can get out there. But Tutu Atwell's still more of that field stretching type, right? He's not a guy that's going to command a ton of volume. And then you look at Tyler Higbee. He had an okay game last week, 4 catches and a touchdown. He would be on the streamer radar with Puka out here. But yeah, the guy that I would look to would be Whittington, who would also be in the wide receiver 3 flex range. And you might not get a touchdown, you might, but those numbers I showed from last year, right? 60, 70 yards. If he gives you that, you are more than happy to get that from a guy that you're picking up just to be that wide receiver 3 flex streamer type.
Worth noting, too, Jacksonville is going to be without Devin Lloyd, their star linebacker, who's been incredible this year. He did not travel to London, and that's obviously critical to defending this type of player in the Rams offense. You need those linebackers to be right and tight in coverage, so that could be something that benefits Jordan Whittington if you're looking to play him in a desperation-based spot. My last point on this, and then we'll throw to the next question here. If there's no Josh Downs in Indianapolis, I think they're going to have to go back to A.D. Mitchell unless they're just done with him, which – based on how excited they were, like overly excited they were with him last year in training camp, that would be a harsh turnaround to all of a sudden just be outright done with him. But he is an interesting player, you know? Okay, so there maybe they are just completely out on him. If there's no AD, if A.D. Mitchell plays and Alec Pierce is out there, I actually think Michael Pittman would kick into the slot a little bit to replace some of Josh Downs' work, and that might be good against a very zone-heavy defense. Obviously, with the LA Chargers, beating zone is kind of Michael Pittman's specialty, so I think that could actually cause me to increase his projections here for this upcoming week. Unless we can throw to the next questions, Boone, unless you have anything on that.
Well, I think one thing that we should probably hit on, and because we briefly touched on it twice, I think we skipped it, but the Bucs and the pass catchers there, like what should we expect from them, right? Because if Mike Evans comes back, the way we talked about it on Monday during the waiver wire show was, okay, you have Sterling Shepard and Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson and Cade Otton at tight end stepping up, and maybe they become interesting plays if all 3 of those top receivers are out. But if Mike Evans comes back, that bumps everybody down. It makes those other guys like, Sterling Shepard, maybe you could play as a flex, but he would become pretty risky at that point. Tez Johnson, then at that point, I think you're just expecting like a big play from him in order to have him as a flex in your lineup. And even Cade Otton, who's someone I initially ranked in the top 12 this week, if Mike Evans is out there, I don't think Cade Otton is the same kind of fantasy play. Could he be a streamer? Absolutely. Is he a top 12 option? I don't think so at that point. So if Mike Evans plays, that just kind of changes based on what we said on Monday when it comes to these pass catchers. It bumps them all down a little bit. So Cade Otton's still somebody you could get in your lineup, but don't expect necessarily top 12 numbers. I would think more of that tight end 2 streamer type, which is fine for a bye week replacement or an injury replacement guy. But yeah, might not have the same kind of ceiling.